What you're about to engage in is a special recording of the Equity Challenge brought to you through United Way of Rhode Island in partnership with Slate Media. My name's Kevin Mata, and I'll be your facilitator and guide for this year's Equity Challenge journey. These are real stories told by real people meant to humanize the purpose of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and actually highlight the unity behind it. Welcome to the journey. We're excited to have you here. All right. Well, welcome to day one of the Equity Challenge for 2025. I'm so excited to be with two United Way All-Star employees. If you could tell us what your name is and what you do, I'd love to hear that and have our guests know who you are too. So why don't we start over here?
All right. Hi, my name is Karla. I am a Providence native. I work as the PVD Equity Fund program officer at the United Way. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ellijah McLean. I serve as our Manager of Government Relations and Policy at the United Way, and I'm also a Providence native, too.
Yeah. Same here. Providence native all the way. I really enjoy that. We are gonna have such a great conversation today, and today's topic is really around DEI being universal, right? And so I think right now there's been so much going on around even challenging, right? I mean, even participating in something like the Equity Challenge, I think brought some fear to folks, and folks are like, do we do this? Do we not do this? Are we still doing this? Are we not doing this? And so I really wanted to just start off this conversation with talking about how it's good for the greater good, right? And diversity, equity, and inclusion, when we name it, when you say each one of those words out loud, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's everyone wins when we're doing those things, right? So I'd love to bring in your perspectives a little bit from this. So share with me how you've benefited either from DEI or how you currently see DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in its greater landscape.
Sure. Yeah. So obviously, like in the day-to-day work I do around policy, I often think about the entire state of Rhode Island, and all 1.1 million individuals that look different, that sound different, that have different experiences, and bring a lot of different riches to the table, whether it's personality or traits or, ethnic backgrounds, cultures, whatever have you. And so for me, strong policy includes everybody. And
Yeah.
that does include diverse individuals, that does center equity, and that does obviously include inclusion as well. So in my day to day, it's very relevant. And I think for there to be strong policy, I think all three of those keywords need to be included. And we need to think about not only the majority and the minority, but the full comprehensive, population of Rhode Island. And then I'd also say, as a Black identifying man and my undergraduate experience going to a school where I was one of 53 Black men at a very elite college, that was troubling. And
Yeah.
knowing that, again, a school like that needs to include diverse backgrounds, should have initiatives that are rooted in, building a student body and a population that reflects the demographics of the country and not just the majority that have historically gone there. So I think there's a lot of insight for why DEI is valuable and why it's important. And it shouldn't be as politicized as it currently is right now. It includes everybody, literally.
Correct. And I love that you humanized it to that effect that it includes, for example, we're talking about Rhode Island, diversity includes every Rhode Islander. It's not a specific type of individual or anything, right? It's all voices, it's all experiences. And so I appreciate you really elevating it to that perspective about making it universal.
Yeah.
How about for you, Carla?
Yeah. Every time I think about diversity, equity, inclusion, I think about the curves in the sidewalk and how they were
Yeah.
created for people who, had ability and to help them walk better. And that helps everybody and it doesn't prevent anyone from walking on a sidewalk. So when I think about how diversity, equity, and inclusion has been politicized lately, there's this false narrative that it only benefits one person or what kind of
Correct.
person. But by bringing diverse people to the table, we have a full understanding of all individuals and the needs of all individuals. By including them in the conversation, specifically talking about policy, we're able to make more informed decisions that will benefit all people, all Rhode Islanders, and all their needs. As myself, I also went to a predominantly white institution as an undergrad, and e- we I benefited from diversity, equity, and inclusion by going through the talent development program, where that we were able to work with people of the same background as us to help us navigate our way through college, where we didn't feel like the odd one out, or we felt that our needs weren't being met or heard by our professors or whoever was there interacting with us in a higher level. So we had, a lot of advisors who not only went to URI themselves, but also grew up in the same places as us. And they were able to help us navigate, any type of difficult decisions we had to make in college, whether we had to like help me pick my classes or I need help. I think this professor's kind of taken some things out on me. And I was able to have a safe place where everyone else looked like me and they were also experiencing the same thing. So we were able to lean on each other and go through college together.
Right. And I love that, right? And so again, so for some folks, they might be thinking, but that's the problem with DEI, right? Or that's the issue with it, that it's benefiting a specific type of individual or giving them access or opportunity above others. But when in reality, that then translates to you now being here and working on something like the PVD Equity Fund to create access and equity and opportunity for everyone again, right? So it goes right back to it's actually good for the greater good, right? There's no harm or foul in this work in any way, shape, or form. I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah,
add to that.
and I often think too, like the misconceptions or the, I guess, perceived notions around DEI and who it benefits, right? Like individuals think about race, ethnicity, right? And not, acknowledging the point that Carla mentioned around, for example, varying abilities, right?
Mhm.
Or varying age groups or veterans, individuals with different statuses. And so to me, I really think the performative aspect of it is very politicized, right? And it's like
Absolutely.
the reality of it is, again, if you're in a school, for example, and a majority of your students are multilingual learners, supporting those students would be benefiting the entire school, not just, again, the multi-language learners who happen to be the majority of the students. So in a situation like that, where you have, a student body that doesn't relate to their teachers, or the teachers don't relate to them, or the school administration or the leadership doesn't relate to the students there, it makes a very disproportionate impact for those students and their abilities to learn. In reality, again, they're not learning properly. They're not having the access to workforce development, post-secondary education. That impacts the entire system. That impacts our
Correct.
economy, our workforce,
Yes.
all of that. So I think there's a lot of, again, preconceived notions when they hear diversity, equity, inclusion, and they think like Black individuals or folks
Correct.
who are less worthy of having, a place at the table.
Can you speak to a little bit about both of you to that kind of rippling effect that you just talked about? So again, it's not just beneficial for this one group today and now, but it actually impacts, right, when folks don't have access and opportunity, our taxes, what we pay, cost of goods, access to workforce. So like, can you tease that out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, the Rhode Island demographics and the number of multilingual learners, for example, that we currently have, we're the fastest growing. That's the fastest growing population in our state, one of the fastest growing in the country, and Rhode Island leads the country in that, in that increase in demographic there.
Oh,
And so when you think about it again, if we're not supporting the individuals in our state that are growing rapidly, we are not supporting our state. We are not setting ourselves up for success. So, for example, if those individuals do not have access to economic stability services or programs like VITA or free tax delivery, it becomes very challenging for those families. And unfortunately, the members of the state will actually have to pick up that burden. So there is, a major ripple effect there. And again, in order for our state to strengthen and improve, we have to support the population that looks exactly what it is right now, and it's growing.
yeah.
And it's becoming more diverse. It's becoming more culturally, diversity in culture, diversity in ethnicity, and frankly, there should be more diversity in thought. And DEI again programs support that entire comprehensive package, not necessarily the mainstream thought. It includes all individuals, and it should include all individuals, so that we can best support the entire state, so we can move forward collectively and comprehensively, not just by sector and pockets of individuals.
Correct. Yeah. Carla, what are you seeing in this work right now?
I mean, right now in the work specifically to the Providence Equity Fund, the biggest thing is that we're meeting these specific organizations where they are. We have a portfolio of about 15 organizations, and each one of them have an independent need. And as a program manager, as a data analyst, and a policy officer, we're able to give them real time assistance for whatever their needs are, however they arise. We can speak about like the one organization who just was able to pay their executive director for the first time since starting the organization 4 years ago with this fund. Or we can talk about, how this fund was like a seed fund for another organization who is coming up with this really great program to have, how do I explain it? They are creating funds for people who are renting. So they're buying property.
Yeah.
And they're going to offer these property at a lower rate for justice involved individuals so that they don't have a barrier to having housing. And then once they are in there, part of their rent will be put in the index fund that can grow over time, and they are able to use that for whatever their needs are.
Wow.
Whether they want to go back to school, whether they need it for an emergency, they have a pocket of savings that they didn't even have to think about. So it depends on how each organization needs a little bit of everything. So when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically something like the Equity Fund is acknowledging that each organization and the individuals they serve are different and have different needs, and how are we going to work collectively to support each other to get those needs to those individuals
Correct.
for the greater good.
Yeah, I love that you kind of pulled that thread through, which demonstrates that these organizations that we're supporting through the work of equity or through a DEI initiative, right, specifically, it's not just for these organizations for the sake of them existing. They're doing it on behalf of their constituents, which are also Rhode Islanders, right?
Exactly.
There are people that still depend on these services or have needs, right? And to your point, Elijah, it could be someone with varying abilities. It can be someone who served in our country, as a veteran who was injured and now is trying to find a new way back into the workforce development opportunity or wants to learn new skills. So once again, it helps everyone, right? We're not hindering one specific group or opportunity.
Certainly. And and another really key point to think about is, for our senior population, that typically, again, who speaks for them, right?
Mhm.
And who includes them in these conversations, and the access to technology, education, information, and just frankly the shared supports that, they don't have, at the nearest of their at their nearest disposal. So I think there's a really strong misconception on who these programs or who DEI really supports. And I always remind myself of like going to a predominantly white institution and seeing the largest demographic there being white women. And, affirmative action policies were very, very, very supportive of white women getting into higher education, having access. And that then benefited the entire spectrum of people.
Correct.
So again, a program like that had targeted goals that then benefited the entire country of multiple demographics being able to have access to higher education. Again, it's still flawed. There are still schools that have very low numbers of, like my undergrad, that is improving, but they have to be now strategic in order to make, those conscious efforts to improve their student demographics so that it best reflects their mission, that it best reflects, the population around them. And that's a really challenge. And I think here in Rhode Island, we're trying to do our very best in ensuring that, again, multilingual learners, the largest demographics, in our state, have the supports that they need. And a lot of the times, the funding formulas, the state, they don't necessarily reach the community that it's intended to. That was drafted years ago. So without a focus on DEI or without even an acknowledgement of that, you still have people falling through the cracks, and that's not going to improve unless there is a targeted effort related to DEI or DEI specifically that can really get at, again, those cracks, those individuals who are slipping through the cracks. And it's not decreasing. That number is only increasing. So,
We're seeing it more and more, especially from the impacts of COVID, right? And that left a lot of folks hindered in many physical ways, right? With ailments and different cognitive abilities. We're seeing that and the effect it has on the workforce. So once again, that's an outcome that has happened to people, right? Was not racially, targeted. Of course, we know who it who COVID impacted the most, but still we're now needing to serve those people and those opportunities as well.
Yeah.
I also think with DEI too, it's not just knowing the people who've been impacted, is knowing how and why, and then using that information to then make better decisions in the future so that the outcome doesn't always end up being the same. And you mentioned like a higher education. I think about, we had something like talent development, but it wasn't enough to just get us through the door. We needed the support
Mhm.
while we were going through school to help us maneuver our way through. And I think that can be related or applied to every way that we look at DEI. It's not just a matter of like saying that we're doing it and checking this box. It's like, how do we understand how this got here? What are we going to do this with this information? And then how do we meet this individual where they are so that we can change the overall outcome?
Yeah. And something too that, that is really hot topic for Rhode Island right now is our access to healthcare. And that is a really major concern because healthcare access, there's obviously race implications and, demographic data on who has access to healthcare. But having a weak infrastructure in healthcare and having a community or a state that isn't quote unquote healthy or doesn't have access to comprehensive and affordable and strong healthcare services, that impacts our entire state. That impacts the wealthiest individuals who will then have to, again, ideally likely pay more for their access to healthcare. For our individuals who are middle income, who will then have to experience that same. And then for individuals who are lower income, who will literally have very limited access to healthcare. That entire gap right there will obviously impact our medical providers, the insurance providers, the folks who typically would not have to
Ripple
worry.
is huge.
Yeah, the folks who wouldn't have to worry about those things will now have to worry about those because, again, a lack of inclusion and equity in healthcare for the majority of the people in Rhode Island. So, I think that there's always a lot of misconceptions around who DEI initiatives typically and really support. The reality is it's strong, like the topic of today. It's universal and it lifts our entire community. It may have an emphasis on, again, groups that have not had supports typically or who have lack of access, but granting that access, you don't really hinder or eliminate the supports that the majority has typically had. So it's really important to acknowledge again that if we want our entire society to progress, we need to be able to fit the bill for all of our society.
Correct.
Not just the programs that we think, have typically worked well for, the majority that is now shifting.
Yeah, and there are things that we absolutely all benefit from, right? That were, again, created years ago with the intention of helping a specific type of individual or marginalized group or, to gain them access and opportunity. But I think of something like even elevators. And when I was first kind of trying to think about how does this work impact us, I was like, there are days where I'm so lazy, right? That like I can either take the 27 flights of stairs up to like my apartment or I can take an elevator, right? And so where that access and opportunity was created to give someone that access and opportunity, but I benefit from it every day when I'm like, I'm not going up those stairs, right? Like I'm not doing that, or I've got too much stuff in my hands to carry around. And so once again, it's thinking about that, even those things, right? So when we're saying to people, right, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI is hurting us, I really like, been this LinkedIn post that's gone around where people say, well, can you name what part of DEI is hurting us? Is it the diversity, the equity, or the inclusion? And I think about like if we were to reverse back curb cutouts, or to reverse back elevators, or even things like that we rely on every day,
Right.
where would we be?
My building doesn't have an elevator, and that's a problem for me. That's a real
Absolutely, yes. How many floors do you have to go off?
only two, but they're pretty extensive.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's an old mill building, and
Yeah.
it's pretty real. But again, that was when I experienced an ankle injury and had surgery, and that's really when I wasn't able to walk for months. That was a major concern, and
How
I
did you
felt
get
like
up and down?
I had to hop and like crawl, and that's when I felt like I had to advocate. And so again, you're absolutely right that these are
Yeah.
universal things that benefit our entire community. And I wish that we had an elevator in the building because it made it a lot more difficult for me to maneuver.
Yeah.
And you don't realize how beneficial things like an elevator or a curb cutout are until you need that,
Mhm.
right? It's something that's so universal that you don't see on a day-to-day until you
Yeah.
have to see it. Like, you have to crawl your way up the
Yeah.
stairs.
And there's also that access to, again, multiple accommodations, right? Like, for example, like as someone who, if you're a neurodivergent person, right? And some of those things are discovered later on in life. If there wasn't programs or protocols at our job like ours, where you have that access to, you can identify this challenge you may have or this varying ability you may have, be transparent about that with your team, and they will provide you the supports and accommodations needed. That is very, very, very universally inclusive. And that obviously had to happen because some individual had a problem and they were not supported appropriately. That had a major ripple effect. And now, again, individuals can now seek the accommodations they need, justify it, like, without challenge.
Absolutely, as they should always be able to, right? And those justifications or those types of accommodations aren't just for individuals, right, who have a varying ability to. I think about like returning mothers, or I think about returning parents, right, fathers too. I think about individuals who need time off to care for someone who is in the military and needs to take time off because it's a part of their annual practice drills and all that, right? Again, these practices benefit all, not just some. And so I know you also had an ankle injury too.
Yes. In January, I slipped on some black ice and also recognized how hard it was to walk in crutches. And luckily, it was wintertime, so I didn't have to leave the house. I was also terrified of leaving the house. But I recognized really quickly how certain places are not as accessible.
Correct.
I had a doctor's appointment. I called and I was like, hey, I have an ankle injury. I'm on crutches. Just want to know what floor your business is on, or what floor the office is on, so that I can get up there safely. And unfortunately, I didn't have a great response from the receptionist, where she told me that I would be just fine. And then I realized that that place didn't have an elevator, and it was like a very high flight up the stairs. So I changed my appointment, and I was like, I'll go when I'm able to. But even just asking and the response that I received, it's like, but this will benefit everyone, right? Like, just knowing that the building is accessible will make it so that if I were to show up, I didn't have to prepare myself to like walk up a flight of stairs and possibly re-injure myself, or someone who actually doesn't have the ability to walk and can't make it up the stairs. And it's surprising that it's a doctor's office too.
Yeah.
And there's no elevator in that building.
And the unique thing about this is that, right, it's Rhode Island. We have such old buildings here, which are beautiful. Like, I mean, the one that we're in right now, we're in the Slate Studio, and it's absolutely gorgeous here, but it is accessible. But once again, right, we want to conserve a lot of these places too. And a part of that is that practice of, is this still accessible to everyone? Is this relevant right now to the community and the needs we have?
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point there, Kevin, too, about like how relevant is it, right? And a lot of our DEI initiatives and mandates, they're not a sprint. A lot of them can't happen simply overnight, right? And so as of right now, when we're in this climate where we're facing such federal and local, sometimes even like discourse around DEI, these changes don't happen simply overnight, right? And so I think it's also interesting around, again, the negative connotations and the stereotypes around DEI. It's fascinating how they have been able to move what feels like overnight, right? So years of progress and years of advocacy and years of work that have gotten us where we are now are, being clawed back overnight, it feels like. So I want to, remind folks that, again, these mandates and these efforts take time, right? And if there's the state currently, or if a facility or a building isn't ready for this, or a business isn't ready for it, that doesn't mean it shouldn't happen at all, right? That means there should be some conversations around, again, why this is important, why access is valuable, how does this improve your business, how does this improve your footprint, how does it improve how the community perceives your organization? Those things don't happen sometimes overnight. And so I feel like, we've had years and decades of progress, that I feel like it's being clawed back simply like by this, by a click of a tweet or whatever have you on social media.
Yes.
And that's fascinating how, again, these things did not change overnight, and they shouldn't be able to be reverted simply overnight or a short period of time because folks are afraid of that said progress or feel like they're not ready to make these changes yet. It takes time and it takes effort and it takes an inclusive collaboration to get to that point.
Correct. And to the point from earlier, right, is that a lot of these responses or interventions or practices and policies that have brought us to where we are today, right, to for a lot of folks to be able to benefit from, were voiced by our constituents, right? They were not just made up in thin air to say your building needs to be accessible for accessibility's sake. There are people trying to come into the building who cannot, right? And so how do we help make that possible and actually accessible for people to benefit from? So this week for the Equity Challenge, we're going through the 5 days with folks. Today, you're both kicking us off with the topic of universal. Tomorrow, day 2, we'll be talking about the Equity Challenge being neighborly, intentional, transformative, and equitable. And so I want to ask you both to end us off with what you're most looking forward to as a part of the Equity Challenge, and as a bonus, what's something someone who's listening or watching to this video can take away with them that goes, I can shift this one small thing and I'd be practicing good equity or good universal DEI practices.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, acknowledging that all of Rhode Islanders, you do have an ability to advocate. You do have an ability to make your voice heard. And I want to challenge individuals to think about how some of these policies or some of these initiatives or mandates that have, been really demonized in the media and in the public, how have they benefited you? Like think about that critically, right? Like, again, as a Black man, I never thought, like affirmative action was really doing anything major for me, until I did that critical research and found out again that the initial goals of this initiative were for a specific demographic, and then how it's trickled and rippled down into, me and my colleagues and my family and friends. And so definitely want to challenge individuals to think about how, the policies and mandates that are being demonized right now, critically think about how they've benefited you or your community and how they've improved your life or your lived outcomes.
That's a great point. Thank you for that.
I think to speak on that too, I've been kind of thinking about intersectionality in a different way, where not necessarily what my identity and my personal experience and how it intersects with the systems of oppression, but rather how do the things that I feel as an individual, as a marginalized individual, and how they intersect with someone else's struggle. And it's not, I think that right now, especially where we are in our country, we're thinking about how all these things only impact us and not think about it on a greater level and a greater good. And, if we're not all free, and we're not free until we're all free, right? So looking at things equitably is understanding that each population might need something different, but we need to be collective in making sure that we can support each other to get that, because that's how we achieve equity. That's how we bring everybody to the table. So like something that I hope to get from the Equity Challenge is just a way that we can start to have healthy conversations, have debates that sometimes, we might disagree, but come up with a collective understanding of what our end goal is when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and how are we going to change or take back the words that have been negatively charged or politically charged. And then also, how do we just neighborly, how do we feel empathy for other people's struggles if it's not something that's directly impacting us? And how do we look at it in a way where we can all win at the end of the day?
Yeah. And to your point earlier, right, about that, we're not free until we're all free, right?
Yes.
I think about that quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which is the one that says, "Injustice is anywhere, our threat to justice everywhere." And so again, I think about that for so long. I just think as humans, people that are busy, right? We're just running around. We have a lot of work to do. We've got families, we've got lives. There's everything. But I think we've gotten used to kind of driving in that and at that speed and maybe being in cruise control a little bit. And we have to start to notice that at some point, those rocks that you're driving over or those things, they're going to impact you in your car. And so I think about it from that point of like, if you think that the injustices are going to touch you, at some point they will, right? Whether it's you directly, you as an individual, or you as your family, or it could even be the economy ends up, right? The ripple effect will end up happening. So my hope is that folks really take this away and go, how could I be a better steward of this work and continue to live it out? Because it not only matters for me today, but it matters for everyone tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to engage, and it's an opportunity to challenge yourself. And I think it's also a great opportunity to debunk a lot of the misconceptions. It's the equity challenge is a great, great, great week, and I think it comes at a really important time this year. And Carla's point around neighborly, how does Rhode Island want to be perceived? That's a really big question that we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's going to be an amazing week, and we look forward to all the future programming.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for being with us and for being a part of Team United. And for those of you joining along with us, I invite you to continue the journey. Today is day 1, and we'll see you tomorrow for the topic of neighborly. Thanks for joining.